25 minutes. All right. Hi, my name is Markus Stahl, and I'm going to talk today about. Wait a second.
Oh, shows just the background. Not sure why. Huh? Okay, then we just do it like that, right? It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay. All right. So again, my name is Markus Stahl. I'm from Imbus. I will talk today about robot framework. Who of you know robot framework? All right. Yeah. So not many people know this. So it was invented as a testing framework. And when I talk today about testing, I don't talk about unit testing. So if you think about the testing pyramid, I talk about the tip of the pyramid. So when your application is already like deployed, all code is compiled, and all unit tests and component tests and have finished, when you do this, the final end-to-end acceptance, maybe system integration tests, where you don't know the code, but you know your interfaces, and you want to automate these test cases. This is what Robot Framework was initially invented for. So I count, this is obviously you see now the, anyway, so my job is a test automation architect. I go into companies, introduce robot frameworks, set up the pipelines, maybe bring some test automation engineers with me, and then educate the customers, and then we leave at some point and do something new. And I'm also part of the Robot Framework Foundation. So I work as a board member. It's a huge community. The tool is, I don't know, 15, 20 years old, but still under development and under maintenance of the financing of the Robot Framework Foundation. You see here a picture of the RoboCon that takes place in Helsinki every year. This is like the crowd, all the speakers and workshop organizers and people who organize the conference. So I want to give you the feeling this is like a really huge, open, humble community. And I had been a Java developer and had been sitting in the same room as the testers at my company once, and I realized they all do manual testing, and I thought, why do they do this? Those poor souls. So I started automating test cases first with Groovy and Spock, and at some point I got to know Robot Framework. I thought, okay, I can stop developing my own framework. This is actually what I wanted to invent. And that's how I got into Robot Framework. So really quick introduction. I really don't want to use up the 5 minutes extra break that you just gained. It's keyword driven. What this means, I will show you in a second. This is the most important part. It's based on Python, so this freaks people usually out because they say, I want to stay in my Java world. Actually, you don't really realize that it's implemented in Python. It just runs underneath. The benefit is that it runs everywhere where Python can be executed, and this is like on every device, basically. It's open source under Apache 2 license, and it's backed by the Robot Framework Foundation. Oh. Quick testing theory. So in test automation, we talk about the generic test automation architecture, and usually you say you have these three layers. You have a definition layer, you have an execution layer, and you have the adaption layer, and then they talk to the system under test, the SUT. That's like a common term in QA and testing. And Robot Framework basically is in the middle. It brings some pre-implemented adaption libraries where you can do some date manipulation, string manipulation, and so on. And it brings syntax that often throws developers a bit off because you don't have brackets and semicolons and so on anymore. But for testers who are not really into programming, this is quite nice. And then the Robot Framework ecosystem actually comes with many so-called libraries, and they are in the adoption layer. So you can automate your browser, your mobile device with Appium, and so on and so forth. And basically, you can automate everything that can be touched by a Python interface. And that's also basically everything on this planet. This is how Robot Framework can look like. So don't freak out. So it looks a bit like JBehave or Cucumber. You can use behavior-driven testing, but you don't have to. So you already see like the given end, when, and then they're a bit high colored. So they don't actually belong to the keyword itself. So the keywords are in process operator on the cockpit dashboard. This is a keyword. The usual form of a test specification in Robot Framework is instruction based. So usually you start with open the cockpit, click on a process instance, cancel the process instance. You just give instructions. And the difference to other frameworks is that from the keywords that you build, you can actually construct new keywords. So we have here a keyword called open browser and login, and it calls open login page, login, and validate welcome page is shown. And as it is indicated here, the login keyword is again a Robot Framework keyword that is again written in Robot Framework syntax. And then there you have, for instance, the click keyword, and that comes from the so-called browser library. And that is pre-implemented, so you don't have to learn how Playwright works. There's a Playwright underneath. You don't have to understand how this Python keyword actually works, because you never touch this. Well, you can. Of course, you can go into the code and extend it and so on, but you don't have to. So in the first job that I had, I was working in testing team, and they were using Robot Framework for 3 or 4 years, and they never looked into the code. They always stayed on this high level and were quite happy with it. And then, of course, there's also the reporting side, so you get some nice HTML reporting where you see like every step, embedded screenshots and so on, and also all the raw data that you can pump into your InfluxDB or any monitoring tool that you have. So much about testing. We want to talk about automation today. So since in Robot Framework you can access any system, and you have these high-level test cases where you, for instance, you have to look in a database, you have to maybe look into an Excel file and then call an FTP server and then open a browser and then maybe even manipulate a desktop application, everything in one test case. You can basically automate everything. So it sounds like a good idea to also automate tasks with this, but there are a few challenges because testing is a bit different to task automation. In testing, I execute something and I want to break really fast and soon and get a nice reporting. When a task fails at some point, I want like a few retries maybe. You can achieve this in Robot Framework in the common workflow, but it's a bit hacky. Then also in test automation, you have tests in a sequence, and you never go back. So if your third test case fails, you don't start executing the first test case again because that already passed. But in process automation, if your third task fails, maybe you want to go back, try the second again, and try the third one again. That's very difficult to achieve because it's just text in a file, and you cannot really, well, you could maybe implement some go-to jumps or something, but it's really ugly. And also, as you know, as BPMN experts, there are different kinds of failures. So you have like an incident, but you maybe also have a business error, like a BPMN error. And in testing, you either have pass or fail. And fail is not enough. You want to have more categories. And you probably know where I'm going. I have to skip the slide that I didn't want to show. So the natural thing was, a few years ago, I was roaming the conferences and talking about Camunda back in the days. And I had implemented an integration between Robot Framework and Camunda. But as we see in the example, my approach was very Robot Framework-ish. So my idea was, okay, I have a Robot Framework task and I have now keywords that connect with the Camunda REST API, and I have keywords saying like, get me a process instance, get me a workload. And that was still a bit complicated, but Asko, Soka, he is also in Operaton Slack. He had a better approach, actually focusing on the external task pattern. And so soon I was advocating that solution. And that's the Operaton Robot Playground. So every year. So this year we had a workshop at Robocon integrating robot framework and Operaton an external task pattern. And we're going to give the same workshop, an updated version, next year in February again in Helsinki. So if you're around, please come. And it looks the following. So you have Operaton, you have Purio, which is the Finnish term for leeks, or this vegetable, Lauch in German. And that actually is, Purio is especially like for Operaton. So it polls the workloads. Robot framework itself is unaware of the robot framework task is unaware of the engine. So if you have another engine, you could just switch to another worker, but still use the same task in task automation. And you basically in robot framework you have a custom scope that we introduced, and then if you automate your task in robot framework file, you give it to Purio, which the command line tool is then called purr, which sounds like purr and the nice sound of a cat when they're really happy and calm. And then this worker is like polling all the time and then doing everything for you. Also, like this nice HTML report that you had seen, it's reporting it back to the engine. You can actually see the result of your task execution in Operaton itself. And so this is like a use case for the process automation where robot framework and Operaton make this entire automation stack. So no matter what you have to do, you can do it with those two tools. I have use cases of in the public area. They want to digitalize everything, and now they have like a legacy service that has a file-based interface. Then you have legacy service with a REST API, and now they want to integrate all of it until they have like proper interfaces installed. And with robot framework and Operaton, they can like provide to the user, to the citizen, like a full digital experience. In the back, they're calling it the legacy. They're calling the legacy interfaces, and it's until they get like everything integrated. That's one piece how you can use both of them together. Then I had a talk 2 years ago where I talked about really complex testing scenarios. So for instance, in the finance industry, you have like really distributed test systems where you test with production-like test environments. So you have one bank and their test system is connected to the test system of another bank. And like it is shown here, sometimes you have to stimulate this test system of the other bank and then see the result in your system. And so you cannot really have this in a Jenkins pipeline or something because you don't know when you get the response. And if something isn't in time, you still need a human to look into this. And so I was advocating that you can integrate manual test steps also with test automation if you use a BPMN workflow engine. Where robot framework can also help you is, hypothetically, imagine you put all your core processes in a SaaS solution and realize that maybe that wasn't a good idea and you want to port back to maybe Operaton. And you still want to know if your BPMN workflows and the BPMN models are still working. There's this Camunda library, still a legacy name, I have to change that. And then you have these keywords, and they're far more, where you can, for instance, start a process instance like in the middle of the workflow with a certain workload, and then test your external task worker, and if the right parameters are getting back to the workflow engine, and check the state after the execution of the external task worker. So this was what I had advocated first, like here in my first talk and at RoboCon, where my idea was still like, okay, in Robot Framework, I control everything, but actually Camunda library, the use case is not for RPA, but for test automation if you want to test your process models. So Getting slowly to the end. Oh, wait. So it's a nice match. So if you want to do robot framework, you don't have to be a developer. Of course, it helps. It helps if you have a developer around, but you don't really have to be one. So you can be in RPA, they call this the citizen developer. So somebody who has a broad business understanding, but they don't know the code. And that's enough for robot framework. And you can access any, I call this now system under automation. So not system under test, but system under automation. You can integrate it into any infrastructure because it's Python. Python works everywhere, so you can integrate it in every infrastructure. And also it has like strong programming APIs where you can also have like listeners and so on being hooked onto robot framework execution, like for instance, catching events like when a keyword is executed, when it fails, when it ends, and so on and so forth, so that you can get information out of there and put into any monitoring system that you like. You can easier understand your task automation because as you see in the keywords, any UTF-8 character is allowed. So if you want to have emojis in your automation specification, use emojis in your execution steps. That's fine. If you want to have quotes to highlight something, use quotes. Any special character is allowed. And with the Operaton, of course, you understand your processes better. And if you want to try out robot framework with Operaton together, look on the Operaton.org hub that was introduced like, I think 2 years ago. Nice. 2 days ago, there's the Operaton Robot Playground. That's actually the material from the workshop that Asko and I are giving. Very, very well crafted. And it will be updated in a few weeks or 2-3 months with updates because Robot Framework now also supports secrets and so on. And but if you're really into it and you don't want to pay us or something, you can do this as a self-study course or just contact us. So there's also my social media handle. Basically I have like 2 minutes. There's some experimental stuff. So if you look into Robot Framework, you see this structure where you have test case, and underneath, and now you do an RPA, you switch the terms and then it's task after task after task in a Robot Framework suite. That is a bit cumbersome in my opinion. So there's the Robot Framework REPL, and you see here that you can basically script in Robot Framework syntax. And that's a feature that's currently in VS Code. If you use the Robot Code extension for VS Code, then you get a Jupyter Notebook experience. So you have like a Markdown kernel cell and a Robot Framework REPL kernel cell. And the log underneath here is that you receive that when you execute the Robot Framework cell. And I think the scripting method is more convenient for automating tasks. And of course, nobody has mentioned AI today. So I'm 2.5 hours in or something, or 1.5 hours in. I'm the first one. Of course, there are also experiments with the Robot Framework MCP. There had been a live stream 3 weeks ago, where Mani Kaseria from DB Schenker showed his progress with the MCP server, where you basically can talk to your AI and give them the system under automation and give it some instructions, and then it tries to find its way through this and generates a Robot Framework automation script afterwards so that you can repeat and correct it. So you don't have to start from scratch. I am in time in 20 minutes. I hope this wasn't too fast. Thank you.
I have one question about the robot framework itself to verify if I got it correctly. So, to my understanding, the main value that the robot framework is providing is the wrapping about different testing APIs and bringing it together such that I can, I don't know, define a test case where I access the browser and the CLI and something else. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So often I have to discuss with users or customers, should I use Playwright or Robot Framework? It's always about who's the person who automates this and who's the person who has to validate the test results afterwards. So if you have a front-end developing team and they are the ones being responsible for the front end and they know JavaScript and TypeScript and they know Playwright, that's fine because they only need to, if they only test the front end. But as soon as you have to access something else, then the Playwright won't be enough. So exactly as you said, if you have different interfaces, databases, and so on that you have to use in your test case, then Robot Framework serves all of that. And for Playwright, you basically need developers. So I would be really curious about your Cypress Playwright experience, how that went. So you can have people who are not specialized in JavaScript, TypeScript, or anything, and just let them focus more on the automation task in the business side of the testing or automation in general.
Yeah, hi, Hendrik. Thanks for the talk. I have one question regarding the browser library you were mentioning in the testing part. So when writing tests, let's say in Playwright and stuff manually, I have to take a lot of care about what happens if elements are not loading. I have to wait. I have to do all these things of like, yeah, be prepared that things take longer than I expect. And that's what makes those UI tests often very brittle. So is that already covered by this translation from specification language like into the actual code, or do I have to do something to ensure that these kind of special cases are also covered?
Both. So I don't. It is covered. I don't know if it's already covered in Playwright or if it's covered in the Robot Framework wrapper, so in the browser library. So basically, each keyword that interacts with the browser has 10 seconds of attempt to, or you can even set the timer, but default is 10 seconds. Try to make it work. So if the element appears within 10 seconds, then it continues without failing. If you have a more flaky system, there is also a keyword called wait until the keyword succeeds, where you say, okay, even if this fails, try it every 10 seconds again or every 10 milliseconds again. But that's like something that you would have to put in Robot Framework, but you can hide it in some low-level keyword yourself so that you don't see it in your test specification. That was one of the, before that, the Selenium library was like the go-to thing in Robot Framework. And I think they also now have this functionality as well, I'm not sure. But that was the selling point switching to Playwright because they had more functionalities to make browser test cases or browser automation actually more stable and less flaky.
Okay, we now make 30 minutes break. So we already heard so much what we can do already with Operaton, what people are doing with that, and we now have the chance to in the break to directly talk to each other and enjoy the break. We will be back here at 3 o'clock with a discussion
In half an hour. Thank you very much.